Good evening, welcome. I'm John. I'm a bookseller at Literati Bookstore in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're so pleased to welcome Kathy Fagan, Raena Shirali, and Martha Collins to At Home at Literati this evening to read from their new and forthcoming poetry collections. Just a quick webinar overview for those of you who are just joining us. The chat is closed this evening, but you can keep the chat window open. I'll be sharing links to purchase and pre-order collections from tonight's readers throughout the event. And you can also access the live transcription feature available through Zoom's automated transcription using the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. And if you're watching us later on YouTube, there are always links to purchase books in the description directly below me. You can also click on the little typewriter icon in the corner of the video to subscribe to our channel and be kept up to date with all of our At Home with Literati events once they become available on our channel. And as a reminder, you can shop for more books at literatibookstore.com to have shipped to your home anywhere in the United States. And if you live in Southeast Michigan or the Ann Arbor area, our doors are open to the public for in-store shopping, where you'll also find copies of tonight's readers' books in our store as well, downstairs in our poetry section. But most of all, we would just like to thank you for your attendance this evening or this morning or this afternoon or much later this evening, depending on where and when in the world you may be joining us. So without further ado, I will introduce tonight's readers, and I'll introduce them all at once in reverse order of the reading order this evening. Martha Collins is the author of 10 previous collections of poetry, most recently Because What Else Could I Do, which won the Poetry Society of America's William Carlos Williams Award. Previous volumes include Blue Front, White Papers, Admit One, An American Scrapbook, and the paired volumes Day Unto Day and Night Unto Night. She has co-translated 4 volumes of Vietnamese poetry and co-edited several anthologies. Raena Shirali is the author of 2 collections of poetry. Her first book, Guilt, won the Milt Kessler Poetry Book Award, and her second, Summonings, won the 2021 Hudson Prize. Winner of a Pushcart Prize and a former Philip Roth resident at Bucknell, Shirali is also the recipient of prizes and honors from Vita, Gulf Coast, Boston Review, and Cosmonauts Avenue. Formerly a co-editor-in-chief of Muzzle magazine, she now serves as faculty advisor for Folio, a literary magazine dedicated to publishing works by undergraduate students at the national level. She holds an MFA in poetry from The Ohio State University and is an assistant professor of English at Holy Family University. Raised in Charleston, she now lives in Philadelphia. And reading first this evening, Kathy Fagan is the author of Bad Hobby and Sycamore, a finalist for the Kingsley Tuff Award. He's also the author of 4 previous collections, including The Charm, The Raft, winner of the National Poetry Series, and Movings in St. Rage, winner of the Vassar Miller Prize. Fagan's work has appeared in venues such as the New York Times Sunday Magazine, Poetry, The Nation, The New Republic, Best American Poetry, and the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day. She has received the National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship and Ingram Merrill Foundation Fellowship and served as the Frost Place Poet in Residence. Fagan is co-founder of the MFA program at The Ohio State University, where she teaches poetry and co-edits the Wheeler Poetry Prize book series for the Journal and the Ohio State University Press. Please join me in welcoming all of tonight's readers this evening into your living rooms.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is my book that came out just last month, Bad Hobby, and I'll be reading 6 poems this evening and then turning it over to Raena and Martha. Bad Hobby is a very autobiographical book, my most autobiographical book, that had at its genesis my dementing father moving in with me in 2013. We aged together in my home for 5 years before his health became too bad for him to stay at home, and we needed to move him into a memory care facility. During that time, we navigated various American public health care systems. I lost my mother during that time as well and grappled with my own childlessness. I'll begin with a poem called Cooper's Hawk. That afternoon, out running errands on a road filled with others like me, the sky bent a moment with a hawk and its prey. I remembered her then, not at the sight of them. The driver to my left saw too, the flap and glide a few feet above traffic, air made visible between the wing feathers and the finest hairs of the limp squirrel's fur. I remembered her because she taught me their names. This one, Cooper's hawk, raids the nests of birds and small mammals in spring. Unlike others that bite to kill, it squeezes prey to death in its grip. They've been known to drown their catch, preferring to use their beaks for eating, never as a weapon. My tolerance for nature red in tooth and claw rose as my estrogen fell. The wish to die died with my hormones. And with all that powering down, I could finally hear myself not think. Held tight in the hawk's talons, the squirrel looked already dead, or maybe dazed as it rode the sky above me. It looked like the wet ponytail my neighbor's child wore that night. She'd been in some sort of trouble and was crying. When her father came after her, she tried to defend herself. No words, he said. No words. I don't want to hear you speak with your mouth. At the Champion Avenue Low Income Senior and Child Care Services Center. When I told them it must be like dropping your kid off at school their first day, all my parent friends nodded and smiled uncomfortably, meaning, what would I know? I won't be taking solace in the many firsts ahead. Here, among the gray, spotted, and brown heads of the seniors, their soft flesh and angles, their obedience as they sit as uprightly as they are able at white parallel tables, nobody cries, and very few speak. When I seat Dad beside her, one senior tells me she's 94, presenting one hand, 4 fingers in the air, just as she might have 90 years ago with a stranger like me, now long gone. Dad never liked me to talk. Lower your voice, he'd say. If I was louder, put on your boxing gloves, or you'll catch more flies with honey than vinegar, as if someday I'd need the flies. I stopped talking, started writing instead. I work full-time and Dad wants to die, so I dropped him at the Champion Avenue Low Income Senior and Child Care Services Center, a newish building, municipal and nondescript, in a neighborhood that's been razed and rebuilt so often it's got no discernible character left. There was bingo, men playing poker in a corner, red sauce and cheese on white bread pizza for lunch. Dad, a big talker, was an instant hit, but refused to return. What is the name of that animal? Someone asked me. Where is Philip? Asked someone else, over and over, as if firsts and lasts were one and the same. And this is the title poem, Bad Hobby. From his pocket, my dad pulls a roll of wooden toothpicks bound with a rubber band. We're driving to the VA to have his toenails trimmed, as we do every 3 months. A standing appointment, I used to say to him, but he no longer gets the joke, asking only why I can't do it myself. And why won't I? I've catheterized him twice, but can't bring myself to tend his feet, so like mine, wide with high arches, ballerina feet, my mom called them, none of us dancers. Now that he's lived with me for almost as long as he lived with her, I'm beginning to look like Mom, pissed. The podiatry techs are always good-natured, thanking Dad for his service, raising their voices when I remind them he can't hear. The big toenail on his left foot looks to be made of horse hoof. They cut and file, but never hurt him. Some vets smoke outside the building, waiting on rides. Don't ever smoke, Kath, Dad says. It's a bad hobby. Scrambling his words, forgetting our ages and both our pasts. The toothpicks he saves and reuses, even when broken, he calls a bad hobby, and the drinking he once was well enough to do. Vets here age out at Korea. Most are Vietnam, Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan. Since the suspension of the draft, only the poorest of us serve. Like sports, the art of war holds little interest for me, though both are everywhere on display. And in theory, I get it. Offense, defense, spectacle, competition. The Renaissance painter Uccello was commissioned by a nobleman to paint the famous triptych of the Battle of San Romano, a skirmish, really, between city-states fought by mercenaries. More than the birds he was nicknamed after, he loved linear perspective, using mathematics to create a three-dimensional effect. The work hangs in 3 European countries now, in keeping with its divisive history, and is considered Uccello's masterpiece. Painted with egg tempera on poplar, it reminds me of the Tara, with its broken staves like toothpicks and sexy horses. The gold leaf's intact on the bridles, but the silver of the soldier's armor has oxidized, darkening to ghostly shades. My mother's hobby was painting, is how I know. Uccello's daughter, a Carmelite nun, was described by Vasari as a daughter who knew how to draw. None of her work survives. Hobby derives from a Latin diminutive for horse, from which we get hobby horse, as in one man's sport, another man's war. On the other hand, habit is defined as a sustained appearance or condition from habeo, meaning I have, hold, keep, known in some cases as hard to break or more useful broken, a spirit, a promise, a horse. Change it up here a little bit and talk about one of my Irish immigrant grandparents. The title of this poem is The Supreme Farewell of Handkerchiefs. My first time in the sky, I flew with my grandmother. She wore high heels. She'd come from the old country by boat, cleaned for a living, died before retiring from a factory job. The stewardess, also in heels, awarded me a set of metal wings, pin glued on the back. Some passengers received fresh decks of playing cards. It was just like the footage you see of flying in the 60s, except it was my real life. I wasn't scared, but held her hand anyway because I liked to. As we rolled, shuddered, and climbed, everyone and everything we loved below us, goodbye, goodbye. At first, clouds parted like cream, then bitch slapped our little plane good until we'd all had time to consider. Some asking why, I imagine, some asking why not. How many times now has it happened, holding hand after hand in the air, or pressing both my hands together, thinking of theirs? That one's bones, this one's thumbs, another's tremor, their grace, skin, temperature, pressure. Why not here, in sky that stays sky, flying like the birds I cannot stop writing into poems, no matter how many people say enough with the effing birds. Actually, only poets say that, and we're lying because there's never enough for us. A juvenile sparrow hopped to our threshold, considered what it might find inside. Don't worry, baby, I said. We're okay. And with a sound like tiny cards being shuffled, it lifted its body back up to the sky. And I'll close with these 2 poems. The title of this one is actually 2 phrases, the first from Lucille Clifton, the second from Anne Sexton. The title is Where I Am Going, I Dare to Live. I can't say grief lived there, because nothing ever did. Its purpose seemed to be to wait, and like me, to contain its waiting. When the priests called Rachel, Sarah, and Elizabeth barren, I could think only of cathedrals and railway stations, specifically dust swirling in tunnels of light, the clockwork sounds of wings and footsteps. When I studied the ancient practice ostraca, I smashed an empty flower pot, wrote my brother's name in magic marker on a shard, exiled him from the empire. To my surprise, he cried. I'd forgotten what it was I felt. I needed to see. Outside had taken me in. I loved it not for its vastness, but minutiae, which I observed with the attention of one who is not herself observed and cannot bear to be. Mica in the pavement, larva in the rose. I fetishized the sea monkey, diorama, created little worlds of rules. If you see wind holes in the cedars on one side, you miss sparrows nesting on the other. And if you leave the utility lines out of your picture, you're not being honest. Be honest. When I first saw real wallflowers spangle at the preserve in their tiny, deer-proof cages, I became breathless, to be singled out, protected. We girls saved our cigarette ashes to fade our Levi's with. We crisped our hair with curling wands. We always smelled like smoke, playing as we did with fire, like Bovary or Butterfly, without beauty or the babies. One friend, a nurse now, sent video of Johnny Depp on a pediatric oncology ward. He visited as Captain Jack Sparrow, one patient in particular. Piracy and stardom had never been easier. The girl leapt into his arms. Her silent mother was more reluctant. She knew how to wait, as did those barren women of the Bible, all of whose wombs were opened by God for acts of faith, some giving birth well into their 90s, except for one, daughter of Saul, wife of David, who failing them both, displeased the Lord, and about whom it is written, Michal had no child till the day of her death. Now I'll close with a shorter poem called Scarlet Experiment, which you'll recognize as a phrase of Emily Dickinson's. There are two epigraphs, one from that poem by Dickinson, Split the Lark, and you'll find the music, and the other from J. Robert Oppenheimer, Now I am become death is the quote. Oppenheimer is the father of the atomic bomb, and he's quoting the Bhagavad Gita there. Like my country, I prefer to forget most things. Our series of rentals in California, for instance, zoysia grass blazing straight for the oleander at fence line. Beyond them, holograms of mountain ranges, the Santa Anas for one, sharing a name with the seasonal winds as my brother and father share theirs. In memory, they battle tooth to horn, fear rising from their bodies like dust. Ranchers would sacrifice their bulls for the popular bear bullfight entertainments of the 19th century. By 1924, all the grizzlies were dead. They put one on the flag instead. His first time visiting the dementia unit, my brother points at a picture book, prompting our father to name streets and buildings of the city we were born in. Luxury condominiums now, Dad reads flawlessly. 270 Broadway was the birthplace of the Manhattan Project. After we bombed Hiroshima in 1945, scientists predicted nothing would grow there. The following year, oleander returned, thriving despite the rise of human dead. People love a comeback. Hiroshima was named a city of peace and World Heritage Site. The nuclear family is encouraged daily to create new memories. You can make anything end. Thank you. And next, we will welcome Raena Shirali, whose new book will be out in 2 weeks, Summonings. I'm especially pleased to hear her tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Oh gosh, what a treat to hear those new poems out loud. I am just so excited to read book. Everyone should get a copy ASAP. It's an honor to be reading with the two of you this evening. Martha's pub date is today. Martha, very so exciting, an incredibly exciting day through brand new collections. Wow, okay, I'll stop gushing. I tend to do that for a long time. So I'm going to start by reading you just a little bit from the foreword to this book, Two Summonings, which is my second book out now. I believe there's a link in the chat, or out soon, I should say. You can order it whenever. So I'll read you just a little bit of context before jumping in here. In this foreword, I write, this book investigates the ongoing practice of witch hunting in India, specifically in Jharkhand and in migrant Adivasi communities of tea plantations in West Bengal, though the phenomenon has also been documented in areas like Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Bihar. And then I'm going to flip actually into the back matter and read you just a brief quote before getting into this poem. This is a quote from a bit of anthropological research about witch hunting. So it notes, in almost all cases, the identity of the witch is that of a local village woman whose reputation can be easily maligned through accusations of witchcraft. In a matter of a few hours, through gossip, rumor, and conspiracy, the entire village then blames her for collective misfortune. As Radha Krishna Kishore stated in 2016, she's the Assembly Party Whip of Jharkhand, quote, people here brand a woman witch and kill her even when the village well goes dry in summer. Ghazal against declining to name the subject. Bahura Bai, it matters that you have a name, that you live past the story. You were young, Tirat Sahu, chased out of your home by 12 or more friends, men, family, called antisocial, killer. Younger still, the children falling sick, cattle keeled over, growing rancid in year-long heat, buried as afterthought. In your own youth, you thought Dions real. The process of attraction, the power of girls to inflame passion, to subdue boys at their will, made your young skin prickle. Here, there is no archetype ungendered. And blood like yours, like mine, doesn't stay profitable long. And I'm too young to be telling your story, and privileged, and the rain keeps falling like the sky's own mountain, your youths hiding under their cot, your husband accused of sheltering you. Jambai, there is only more terror. Gone now those youthful days, the men would stop by your house, ask for rice, for roots. Even then, the killing had begun. No one here, at last, stays young. So I'll read you just another piece of research. You can probably already sense a theme here is research that details some of the factors that go into a woman being accused of being a witch in India. Yeah, and I think I'll pause there. Yeah. This quote reads, faced with poor wages and the associated dismal living and working conditions that accompany a suppressed working class, the Adivasi workers connect the micro village level strain of ailments to witchcraft, rather than blaming the deaths on the lack of proper medical aid for the workers. Forces noting as having influenced this culture of accusation include land disputes, anti-colonial tensions, fear and suspicion of women's sexuality, and more broadly, gender conflicts legitimized by religion, folklore, and patriarchal customs. So in this next piece, you're going to hear something a little different from the first one. Several of the poems in this collection are persona poems, engaging with Dions, which is the word for a woman who's been accused of being a witch. But there are also a lot of poems where I am thinking about my positionality as an author in the West, writing about a subject that is so distant from my lived experience. This poem is one of the latter. At first, trying to reach those accused, I swallowed burnt matchsticks, her hair a tar tumbleweed in the room's south-facing corner. I did this to pray, and I did this to feel. And then I swallowed my old chant, his name, like I'm not made of my oppressor's undoing. And then I swallowed theory. I swallowed plantation politics, tried prying plantains from my lips, plump from sitting on a velvet couch and touching them dry to my wrists while reading about her body, strung up for slaughter, called names in the oppressor's language, covered in silt. And then I swallowed puddles. And then I swallowed sandalwood and tried to cloak and cover and render her erotic, for the oppressor sometimes saves the objects of his desire. And then I swallowed desire. I held the smoldering cow dung patty at my core. I smelled like it. I was shit and wanted to be shit. And then I swallowed pretense, swallowed countries. Why try to get close when you could become, I said. And then I swallowed myself, chased me down with goat milk and shorn fur. And then I turned to the page and swallowed it. And I took it like a shot and took it like a man and took the punches and still wandered through mazes of huts, asking my people what it felt like to be oppressed. Then I swallowed tea. I swallowed the fertilized soil. And then I swallowed braids and locust shells, and I wanted to smell like incense because the oppressor values patchouli and cedar. So I bought a candle to smell like my heritage. And then I swallowed wax and was viscous, and suddenly then I could not move. And my ankles were bound, but they left my wrists free. And I could not speak, but still I mouthed a name I'd never heard, and I felt her like my own ghost. There was no magic. It was not profound. So to add to the long list of reasons or cultural factors that create a system of accusation like this, there's also this detail I found really fascinating while I was doing the research, that inside these cultures, right, which are quite obviously now patrilineal and patriarchal, where they once were matrilineal and matriarchal, now women can, quote, derive power and status by claiming to be possessed by the spirit of a goddess to effectively resist oppression. So in one horrific representative case that I read about in horrific detail, quote, a self-proclaimed goddess accused Purni Orang of performing black magic and causing disease and death. As a result, Purni Orang, at age 63, was dragged from her house by a mob, beaten up, stripped, and beheaded for being a witch. So this next poem is called Dian Summons the Village Goddess. At the altar, men must hover around you strangely, squatting in the wet dirt, waiting for a sign. They must praise your forehead, sindur traced from part to temple just so, kumkum a perfect circle, so centered, surely your aura must be pure. Oh, the jewel you have called yourself, woman with light eyes, woman I contended with, how we laughed when the men couldn't keep their gaze off you. Now they imagine you too radiant. They're seeing pastel pink emanate off you in waves. Never mind. I'm outside in the rain, trailing fingers through the mud to make sure you know I was here. The puddles keeping me company are dim mirrors. Or maybe I'm the one who's faded. Inside, Dark magic thrives on your fair sons. They chant for you, bless the parts of you inclined to destroy. Old friend, can't you see, all women crave a burning. Brief silence from beyond the trees. They shout my name. I press a seedling to the earth. So I'll read just two more short poems to y'all. This is another in the sort of latter vein of me thinking about writing about these poems, the more meta thread present here. Summoning chai and failure. In the living room again, I cannot conjure even the space I inhabit. Rain for several years and an expose about flat-beaked birds brushing themselves on sharpest rocks. Wrought of my own inertia, I cannot make the journey across an ocean, spend my only remaining cash on the tangible. I am foreign, and so nothing has ever made sense. I'm domestic, and so expected to understand. I let chai steep for hours on the counter, forget the milk and don't own sugar, and the cup tastes of bitter rain and sheared rock. The cup is cold, the room is empty. I create another version of myself and congratulate for her persistence. Just one more piece. Thank you all again so much for coming. Thank you, Kathy, for sharing your new work with us. Martha, I'm very, very excited to hear yours. There's a strong theme of goddesses, both actual and self-proclaimed through this text. And so I wanted to end with a goddess poem that, let's see, challenges the other goddess poem I read. This piece is called "The Universe Will End and Kali Will Still Be Here." The universe will end and Kali will still be here, solo, skirting the rim of our smolder, our ruin, all lotus bud, bell beat and drum song, those many hands and the severed heads they hold, mask demonic, a warning. Alone in the neither light nor dark, she will stay the dusty blue of not time, will evade even as she creates, is death and is energy, is. I cannot imagine this, outliving one's infamy. How women survive being burned alive and offer in return forgiveness. Girls with reconstructed faces refusing hate. I want to crown all victims the safety of fur. Give each our own grove, something sacred. I want to worship dichotomy. O goddess of lust and violence, I tire of trying to find peace. I want to unleash, to unearth rage. Kali, we lived and our bodies were trespassed. Release us from this cage. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to welcome our next reader. It's Martha Collins reading from her new collection debuting today. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you, Raena, and thank you, Kathy, for those fabulous readings. As Raena said, this is a special day. It's my publication day, which means it's the first day you can buy my book, and I hope you will, from Literati. And Kathy's as well, and you can pre-order Raena's from Literati. So the title of this book, this new book, is Casualty Reports, and it focuses on different kinds of casualties, mostly literal, but also metaphorical. But the most common use of the term is in reference to war and its consequences is central to one part of the book. I'll just read one poem from that section, and And although it was written some time ago, I'd like to read it with the current war in Ukraine in mind. For Gaza. For the woman who cooks on a fire of sticks and boards beside her shell of a house, her bag of clothes in a tree. For physician Ani al-Jarrah, his wife cut in half, his year-old son turned to pieces. For the 30 dead Sumuni family members dug out of the rubble. For the living, including children who clutched dead mothers. For the schools and mosques and homes destroyed by bombs, for the graves disturbed by tanks. For the more than 1,300 dead, including those who walked from their homes as directed with white flags. For those going home to water their trees, lemon and almond and olive, and for those trees. Two of the book's sections focus on coal. And the next few poems are from the first of those sections. In Illinois, my father's father's father had a share in the Enterprise mine, the Enterprise Coal and Coke Company, 1871. He was a shareholder, being a coal digger, kept a log of entries, shafts, and air shafts, rooms by number and number of feet, died 1881. My father's father went down to a river town to work, came back to the mining town where his father went down in the Paradise mine, a miner, and later a mine examiner, tested the air, the face, and the roof. Sundays and holidays, too, walked 3 miles out and back when there was no train. My father, whose mother kept him out of the mines, kept his father's oil lamp, kept his father's carbide and safety lamps, kept the box of Wicks Picks globes, kept his father's 50-year union pin, his first aid pin, his flashlight safe for use, kept manuals, papers. This lamp was given, all labeled. This pin was given, kept it all. It was his legacy, labeled, dated 1965, and signed and kept for me. Movie. When I was 10, they took me into a coal mine. I gave a report to our class that had seen how green was my valley, a movie set in Wales. The miners had lamps, like my grandfather's lamps, and I never forgot the whistle explosion, the father trapped and killed, but I had forgotten the wage cuts, the strike, the lost jobs, the emigration to countries like our own. DuQuoin. In my father's town, which was also Ruby Goodman's town, there were accidents, there were explosions, there were strikes. But although the miners armed themselves at least once against rumored strike breakers, the union, which met in houses before they joined the UMWA, succeeded without violence and became one of the largest locals with over 1,000 members, including Ruby's Black father, for a time the union president. You have to join the union, he said. Everyone does. Every man has the same voice, white, black, gray, no big eyes, no little U's. And the next poem takes its title from a book and its contents from a book by Margaret Wise Brown, published in 1949, whom many of you will know as the author and illustrator of Goodnight Moon. Two Little Miners. Two little miners standing on the little golden book cover. One white and one black, they smile at each other. Like the Integrated Miners Union. Oh, but look inside. They wake up clean as snow, but by night they've turned black. Black as soot, night, a crow, black as black, coal black. Back home, they live alone, but someone's fixed their supper. Two little miners, black as night, scrub in your tub until you're white. I'll return to coal in a moment, but first, a poem that was influenced first by the late Jake Adam York, who made a point of visiting sites where the victims of the civil rights movement and era had been killed. He meant to write about all of them, but when he died at the age of 39, the also late John Tribble invited all poets to visit the other sites and write about them. This one is set in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the three civil rights workers, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, were held before they were killed. Rehearsal. Philadelphia, Mississippi, Luther Jackson, 1932 to 1959. A block from the county courthouse with the Confederate Soldier Memorial, past the jail where the civil rights workers were held while the Klan assembled in '64. Down Bird to Oak to Water to Pine, past magnolias into sweet gum catalpas, into this dead-end cave of trees, where he parked one night with a girl and passed out, and Officer Rainey found them and ordered him out of the car and pushed him out of sight of the girl, who heard two shots and heard Rainey say, "Come down, I think I have killed a..." And then the coroner's jury said, "Justifiable homicide." And Medgar Evers requested an investigation, but the Justice Department said no violation. And 5 years later, they accused Rainey and 20 others of conspiring to kill the civil rights workers. But 3 years later, Rainey himself was acquitted. And 50 years later, the FBI reopened the Jackson case, but found no police, no county records, just newspaper files and relative stories. And anyway, Rainey was dead. Of course, I couldn't have been that girl, but if I'd been the white girl I was and lived here and read the papers, would I have questioned justifiable? And if I'd been here 5 years later and read about the civil rights workers, and decades later when Michael, Eric, Tamir, Philando, and all the others, could I? Can I imagine myself in that car at the end of this dead-end street where a man was ordered out of the car and the girl who was with him, who was not me, cried, "You have killed him for nothing." And now back to coal. Back to its prehistory first. Grave. It is all over the earth, under earth, a graveyard. Tree ferns, trees, roots, bark, seeds, ancient life that emerged from the sea, forests flooded to swamps and bogs, transformed to peat, transformed again, sunk, covered with layers of earth, with strange amphibian, snake, and later dinosaur bones, layers and layers, and under it all for hundreds of millions of years, our ancestors resting under earth, overburdened, we say, until we found them. And the revolution we call the coal to power steam engines, to pump water and lift coal, to sell or use to power steam. Coal to coke for furnaces, to smelt iron to make tools, and furnaces to smelt for rails. Trains to transport coal to power steam engines, and power trains and boats to transport coal. Harness the power of, raised to the power of power. This next poem is also based on a children's book. It's a series that's called Now That's Big. And the machine that is described in the poem takes part of its content from that children's book and part from the website of the machine, which is housed in Germany. Now that's big. Then they made the largest machine, the heaviest in the world. It's as long as 2.5 football fields. It weighs 13,000 tons, has 18 buckets to excavate the overburden that covers the coal. It could fill 10,000 dump trucks per day, as much as 40,000 workers could. It's continuous, never stops. It's still uncovering 40 million tons each year to power electric stations that power much of its country, including itself. It won't stop till 2050, when all the coal in the mine where it works will be exhausted. Whose lungs were lost to coal dust, black coal to black lung, now rock dust to lungs. Whose jobs were lost to strip mines, to mining machines, to natural gas, or paid less because. Who sold mineral rights to land when farming replaced jobs, whose farms subsided, were lost. Two more. Burning. The mercury, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides from burning coal that fill our air and fall upon us as acid rain. The selenium, arsenic, lead from coal ash stored in coal ash ponds that leak and spill and pollute our waters. But most of all, the carbon dioxide released by burning that captures heat, that warms our air and melts our glaciers, lifts our seas and warms them, dries our land and fuels fires, strengthens rainfalls and hurricanes that swell our waters and generate floods, all of which threaten our coasts and cities, our islands and whole nations, consume our animals, plants, insects, and fish. Whole species, including most likely our own, unless. And the last poem. Blessing. Where we dug up the graves of Black slaves who mined the first coal in Illinois, where we desecrated the graves of indigenous people that covered coal in the Southwest, where we dug up animals, plants in their graves and burned them as oil and gas and coal. There and throughout our earth, let us grieve for the graves we robbed, and then let us bless the graves of the dead that remain, and over them for the living, the wind, the sun. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our readers this evening for sharing your work with us. We're so grateful to be able to have you at home with Literati. You can purchase and pre-order Summonings, Casualty Reports, Bad Hobby from Literati. There's links in the chat if you're watching on YouTube. There are, of course, links in the description below me as well. To our poets this evening, we can't wait to have you perhaps in the store and not too distant future for a future event for your next collections. But again, thank you so much for reading from your work this evening. Thank you so much for being here. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great evening, everybody. Take care.